It is day 33 of the Israel-Hamas war, and we are starting the show tonight with some news breaking right this minute. The Palestinian death toll has now exceeded 10,596. Of this, 74% are children, women and elderly people. The death toll, including 88 staff members of the UNRWA, of the United Nations Relief and Works Agency. More than 2,000 people are still reportedly trapped under the debris from the destroyed homes, and the number of injured people exceeding 26,000. Meanwhile, the Israeli Foreign Minister, Eli Cohen, has described Israel's war to wipe out Hamas as the war of the free world.
This is not just the war of the state of Israel. This is the war of the free world. We need to win this war in order to ensure that the West will not be next. Since terrorism, it's like a cancer.
Meanwhile, the Israeli army has released footage of what it says are airstrikes on Hamas infrastructure in the Gaza Strip. Israel has said it was tightening the stranglehold around Hamas. More and more Palestinian civilians have started fleeing south as Israel's air and ground campaign continues. Calls for humanitarian pauses in Gaza are increasing, and today top diplomats of the G7 met in Tokyo while the ministers unequivocally condemned Hamas's October 7 attack on Israel, emphasizing Israel's right to defend itself. They also expressed deepest sympathy for all the civilians killed so far. The G7 diplomats have called for humanitarian pauses and for the creation of aid corridors, but they stopped short of calling for a ceasefire. After the Israel Prime Minister said that Israel could manage Gaza security, the U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken, meanwhile, called on Israel not to reoccupy Gaza after the war. Speaking to reporters after the G7 foreign ministers meeting, Blinken said that Gaza may need to have a transition period after the war. Listen into what he said.
Conflict governance in Gaza, a few things are clear and necessary. One, Gaza cannot be continue to be run by Hamas. That simply invites a repetition of October 7th, and Gaza used as a place from which to launch terrorist attacks. It's also clear that Israel cannot occupy Gaza.
A month of Israeli strikes on targets within the Gaza Strip have destroyed nearly 50% of all housing units. The UN Special Rapporteur on the Right to Housing has stressed that bombardment of housing, civilian objects and infrastructure are strictly prohibited under international law. The Palestinian Health Minister, meanwhile, has pressed for urgent aid for Gaza. She called for the permission to bring urgent humanitarian as well as health supplies as the war claims more lives.
ونطالب بالسماح بشكل عاجل بإدخال الإمدادات الإنسانية والصحية للقطاع، وخاصة الوقود لتشغيل مولدات الكهرباء في المستشفيات، وهذه بشكل عاجل وطارئ وعاجل جدا. وكذلك السماح لدخول الفرق الطبية المتطوعة لمساندة الكوادر الصحية في علاج المرضى والجرحى.
And the nightmare continues. Videos showing bodies being transported away on horse-pulled carts. Our next story is about the debate over assisted dying. While rapid developments in medicine and technology have given us the power to save more lives, what if an individual is in intractable pain, is given an estimate of a few months to live? Does hastening death become a viable and legitimate alternative for willing patients? Or should patients not have the right to end their lives? In the latest, 58-year-old actor and director Sibilla Barbieri last week chose assisted suicide and ended her life in Switzerland after the authorities denied her request in her home country, Italy. As per Vanity Fair Italy, the actress was suffering from terminal cancer for over 10 years, and as she was completely dependent on oxygen therapy, which, if interrupted, would have led to a painful death, Given the severity of her condition, she had requested for assisted suicide back in July. But her application was rejected. And that brings us to a crucial question. Where does the world stand when it comes to the issue of assisted dying? Currently, there is legal provision for assisted dying in only 4 European countries. Switzerland is the only country which permits the act of assisted dying performed by a non-physician. Elsewhere in the world, an assisted death remains a criminal offence, prosecutable through various legal routes. Like, for instance, in the UK, all forms of assisted dying remain illegal and can be considered under criminal laws of manslaughter or murder. And even though in some ways the cultural conversation about assisted dying has evolved, it also raises a number of questions. Can a person with an illness rationally choose to hasten death? Medical language has long shaped and reshaped how we understand death. In 1968, a Harvard Medical School committee came to the conclusion that irreversible coma should be considered a new criterion for death. But those who oppose any measures permitting assisted dying argue that the society has a moral duty to protect and to preserve all life. The debate surrounding assisted dying is never far from the headlines. However, alongside the evolution of palliative care, there appears to be an increasingly vocal desire for legislations to support assisted dying in selected cases. The debate will increasingly come to the fore, something that healthcare professionals, politicians, legislators cannot ignore. Let's now talk about the tunnel warfare underway in the Gaza Strip. The battle has gone underground into the notorious tunnels built by Hamas. The Israeli forces have reached deep into Gaza in order to crush the militant group Hamas. They are on the hunt, using explosives to destroy this vast tunnel network. The tunnels stretch for hundreds of kilometers beneath Gaza, presenting a unique challenge to the Israeli forces, a challenge that will make the already difficult urban warfare a lot more complex. So what do we know about these tunnels and what challenge do they pose? Let's first understand that this is the next phase in the Israeli offensive. Its ground forces are trying to locate and disable the Hamas tunnels. They say that they have entered the heart of Gaza City, the largest town in the Palestinian enclave and Hamas's main stronghold. According to the chief Israeli military spokesperson, Rear Admiral Daniel Hagari, Israel's Combat Engineering Corps are using explosive devices to destroy the tunnel network. The Israelis believing that the hostages are held up here, and they fear that their military operations could endanger these hostages. In fact, the Israeli defense minister has called Gaza the biggest terror base ever built by man.
Gaza is the biggest terrorist base ever built by man. The entire city is one big terror base. There are kilometers of tunnels underground. They connect to hospitals, to schools. They are connected to each other. They have communication rooms, ammunition depots, places to sleep in order to serve as a base of terrorism from which the citizens of the State of Israel and IDF soldiers can be harmed. We are eroding away at this ability. We are advancing, and our forces from the north and south are advancing into the heart of Gaza City and operate in combat within the urban area.
Now have a look at this video released by the Israeli army just yesterday. It shows what used to be an amusement park in Gaza left in ruins following Israeli soldiers' discovery of what they believe to be an entrance to a tunnel linked to Hamas. Another video released by Israeli military purportedly depicting their troops destroying the tunnels in the northern Gaza Strip. The video captures soldiers coordinating an airstrike before inspecting the area. So what lies beneath Gaza? What do we know about this maze of tunnels? This intricate network of tunnels spans hundreds of kilometers, reaching depths of up to 80 meters in some areas. In fact, one former hostage recently freed by Hamas likened it to a spider's web. The Israeli military saying that many of these Hamas tunnels serve as command centers and house rocket launchers. They are often located close to schools, hospitals, and humanitarian institutions in northern Gaza. And this also reportedly includes the Al-Shifa Hospital in Gaza City, the region's largest medical facility. Reports say that within these tunnels, stockpiles of weapons, food, water, generators, fuel, and other equipment are stored. And researchers who have studied these underground structures believe that Hamas's leaders also likely stay here. These tunnels are essentially self-contained, designed for extended conflicts. Israeli forces on the ground are gathering intelligence on this extensive tunnel network, all while avoiding direct entry. Robots and sniffer dogs are being deployed to locate tunnel entrances and inspect the areas inside, paving the way for potential actions by specialist ground troops, including elite commandos from the Yalom unit of the combat engineers. Bulldozers are also being used to dismantle parts of the tunnel entrances due to the suspected presence of Israeli hostages within the tunnels. Operations in the tunnel network are going on cautiously. So what really are Israel's chances of success? Experts noting that there has never been any other military force that has done as much preparatory work on tunnel warfare as the Israeli army. However, there are valid concerns that this operation could be a prolonged one as it involves locating and destroying the tunnels, especially in a way that prevents Hamas from using them again.